Hey now, welcome to America's leading Formula One podcast, The Dirty Side of the Track. I'm your host, Brian Saperstein, and with me as always is Rob Vale. But today we have a special guest and a special guest episode. Rob, tell us what's going on.
Well, you're absolutely right, Brian. We have our first guest. We're only at episode 4, and we already have a Formula One insider who is going to spill all on today's episode. I still feel a bit strange calling him a Formula One insider. To me, he was my best mate's younger brother who we just used to play footy on the local field until it went dark and we couldn't see the ball anymore. And then all of a sudden he was in Formula One and I was seeing him on TV. And I think he's been there pretty much 20 years now, pretty much, give or take. And I'm going to introduce you now to a good friend of mine, Paul Harris. He's had a 20-year career spanning, I think, BAR, Honda, Brawn, Mercedes. A little bit unfortunate. If you try to Google him, if you want to see what he looks like, then if you Google Paul Harris, you're going to find, I think, the legal representative from Mercedes, because he managed to actually have someone in the team with the same name as him. But there we are. So, this is amazing to have him on. So just, hi, Paul.
Hey, how you doing, guys? You good?
Oh, it's amazing. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
That's no problem. It's no problem. I'm over in the USA on a bit of a vacation anyway, so it's filled my time on the road listening to the first few episodes. I've been really good, really impressed so far. So yeah, good to be on, good to be contributing.
Well, we appreciate it, and I like the fact you say the first few have been good, because I'm sure we'll change it with this one when we have a real guest. We'll screw it up royally, but we'll see.
I'll be the one screwing it up, guys. Don't worry about that. You know, guys have been superb on the first one. So, yeah, I'll be the one.
What we haven't done so far, Paul, and right now I don't know if I'm going to need to do it, but we haven't yet had to do an expletives warning at the beginning of an episode. So we'll see if that changes along the course of this one, knowing how you might like to get a little bit fruity with the old language, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'll try and control myself. It depends. It depends how Brian likes to moan at drivers, and then if you mention the word soccer, I probably will have to kick off a little bit. But let's hope. Let's do our best.
Okay, we will sanitize our language as best we can, but we'll turn it back to you, Rob, to talk us about what we're going to do.
I give a very poor introduction there because it's a very personal introduction. The fact that I know you more from the football field than the world of Formula One. So why don't you just give us couple of minutes, Paul, of kind of your background in Formula One, the teams you've been in, and the roles that you've done while you've been there.
Sure. So this story goes back to 1999, really. I was working in mine and Rob's hometown, Evesham, at a Vauxhall garage, which I believe is GM out here. But yeah, I was a big F1 fan. I was a mechanic at a normal garage. I loved Formula One. It was my dream to go and work in it. I kept applying for any job that you can imagine, even like team manager of Jordan, who are now Aston Martin. So yeah, needless to say, I didn't get in there, but a brand new team came on the circuit, British American Racing, which were owned by Jack Villeneuve and Craig Pollock. So I ended up getting a random interview with those for a training mechanic. The interview, weirdly, was identifying drivers' helmets to the car, which I got 100% on, which they still laugh about in the team now. And then, yeah, bizarrely, they decided that I was their man based on that pure ability, nothing to do with spanners, just literally looking at pictures. And yeah, 20 years later, I'm still here. So yeah, that was British American Racing. The way Formula One in teams evolve, I've been at the same team throughout. We've been British American Racing, then BAR Honda, then Honda bought us outright as a straight out Honda team. Then we had the most bizarre year with Brawn GP. Now, I'll touch a little bit more on Brawn GP a little bit later on, because it's a true Hollywood story for anyone who doesn't know. That's back in 2009, but I will touch on that a little bit later. And then Brawn, which only lasted a year, then got bought out by Mercedes, and here we are, up to date. So yeah, been with the same team, although we have had numerous different names, which is pretty normal in the world of Formula One.
And what kind of roles have you done as your roles evolved? I mean, obviously the original role was helmet spotter, but I'm sure it's evolved over the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, that could be taken in a couple of ways, but yeah. So it was. So really, the original job I had was a test team timing engineer. So what that actually was is back in the day, when technology weren't so involved, you had a laptop on test events. So testing events, all the teams would be there. The cars would be on track from 9 till 6. They'd just be running round and round. There could be 3 cars, per team back in them days. So you'd have a laptop and the keyboard would have drivers' names on them. And each time a driver broke your timing beam, you had to nominate that driver to the break of the beam. Sounds pretty boring. It was. I can assure you, after being out there for the best part 8 hours for 4 days, it drove you insane. But the ability to spot a driver's helmet, again, came in useful. So I was pretty good at that. Then things improved somewhat, and it all became automatic. So I then just went on to be a mechanic on the car. Then from there to a garage technician, which basically a garage technician is looking after the garage, looking after the tires, the fuel, all of the things that we'll call the important bits being a garage technician. Then from there, I developed into a tire technician. So probably the hardest job in the team. I ran tires for 6-7 years for Jenson Button, Michael Schumacher. Promoted to chief garage technician. Hard to say these words. From there to team coordinator, and more recently to the garage build manager.
So can I ask a dumb question? What is a garage build manager? What does that entail? Because I don't know.
So garage build manager. So the traveling side of this job is pretty intense. So I needed to have a little bit of time to myself. So I took on a sort of a new role as garage build manager. So what that job basically is doing all the preparation for garage. So you design the way your garage is going to look. So if you imagine imagine your living room at home. So you got your living room. That's what you go into an empty shell. Then you have to design where things go. So where the 2 cars run out of, which 2 garages, where all your paneling goes, where different work areas go, like engines, where the gearbox is built, where the bodywork's looked after, wings are looked after. So you plan all that, and then you go to the track a little bit earlier than the rest of the guys, and you start building everything. So that would normally be 8 days before the race day. Just give you some idea of how long it takes to actually get Formula One races set up. So you'll be there 8 days, so the weekend before, and then you get everything built. Then depending where you are, if it's a European event, so anything that's accessible with our trucks, then they will turn up on a Monday. If it's a flyaway event, so your likes of the USA, Brazil, Mexico, so on and so forth, they would, again, all of your air freight would arrive on a Monday. So I'll break this down a little bit easier. For flyaway events, we have sea freight. So we have 5 40-foot sea freight containers full of all the equipment like tables, chairs, tensor barriers, or like even the entire garage will have 6 sets of the garage that we would send 1 set to Brazil, 1 set to Mexico, 1 set to USA, 1 set to Australia, 1 set to China, and then you swap them around through the year to different events. Just to give you some idea of the scale of Formula One, you'd never be able to do that. You'd never be able to do it if you only had 1 set of equipment nowadays, just the way the calendar is.
So then I guess another question is, someone who is kind of following from here or watching on YouTube and trying to get a feel for this. I hear a lot about 2022 and the cost cap and cost containment and allowing teams that don't have, unlimited money to spend or nearly unlimited money to spend to catch up. Yet there are the most races ever planned for 2022 with 23 races and a lot of globetrotting. So isn't that counterintuitive where you have to have extra sets of, preparation time, moving around the globe more so than ever, yet trying to also keep the cost down? Doesn't one drive the cost up? And then I don't know, yeah. Does it seem opposite there a little?
It's a really good point. I mean, yes, it depends how you allocate your budget. So some of your the cost cap is only really like operational items. So if you think of marketing, so anything that you class as marketing, you can maybe assign in another cost category. So it depends how you structure your finances. There are people way more intelligent than me who will know the answer to that. However, you are correct. I mean, the one thing I will say is that your staff all sort of come under the cost cap. By adding more races and the stress that you put on staff of Formula One, you sort of have to have more staff to cope with the amount of extra races. So you make a very good point. For me personally, I mean, everybody wants more races. Let's be fair. It's what everyone likes to see. Everyone enjoys it. From somebody inside the sport, I can remember when we had 16 races, and I thought 16 was too many. So we're at 23 next year. I mean, yeah, superb for the fans, but as for somebody who works in the sport, from a mechanic side or a garage technician side, it's savage, and it's it's a great job. But the one thing which I will say is the time that you spend away, the time that you are away from your family, is immense in this job. So the cost cap is great. It's going to make the racing a lot better. It's going to be fantastic. But yes, increasing races, for me personally, you've got to increase your staff to cope. Otherwise, yeah, people need lives at the end of the day, and it's a great life in Formula One. I'm not going to say it isn't. It's great fun, but you have to be realistic of the demands that you're going to put onto people.
Yeah,
when you think of Mercedes, you think of Red Bull, you think of the big teams. They've got a lot of infrastructure. They can cope with the demands a little bit better than your Alfa Romeos, your Williams, and your Hasses, with how you manage your workload. So yeah, it's again as part of the cost cap. That's the reason they brought it in. So it's interesting to see how it works. I will say that we look at 23 races and wins, but let's see. You can't judge it for another couple of years until everyone's got the ideas of how it works. The one thing is Formula One just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's bizarre how big the sport is getting now globally.
Well, it really is, and hence kind of one of the things behind me and Brian deciding it was time to turn our Monday morning chats into something we recorded and see if it might catch on a little bit. But it's interesting, you're talking about kind of the logistics side of it, then that's kind of one little insight into kind of what's going on behind the scenes. For some bizarre reason, I always thought that the venues were providing a lot of the kind of the chairs and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of bizarre to think that you're hauling all of that around. I mean, if we can kind of carry on picking at this a little bit to kind of get, from what we don't see from the camera's point of view, me and Brian thought it'd be sort of pretty cool to kind of go through your view of, like you said, stuff turns up on a Monday. If we imagined we're in race week, it would be great for you to walk us through what kind of happens during the week leading up to the race, kind of behind the scenes, what you guys doing, what's happening in practice, what's happening on quali. For quali, you guys aren't doing anything, especially you. You're just sat there just watching them go around. You get the day off. And then obviously the race. And then actually once all the lights and cameras turn off, I'm sure there's a big packing up thing to do before you roll on to the next one. So if we could just spend a bit of time just going through the life of the Formula One engineer from kind of, like I say, build up to the race weekend through. And me and Brian will jump in when we've got something, I say interesting, anything to say, we'll jump in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, I'm going to come back to your point on qualifying, because I think you're going to be quite surprised with qualifying. So, look, each race has got its different aspects of how you set up. On a standard European, if it's the first of a European race, your trucks will normally be there on a Saturday or Sunday, so it's quite easy. And then you sort of get everything out. Your cars will be built in the UK, and that truck will arrive maybe on a Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, because that's when the mechanics get there. So there's no point in the car mechanics will build a car back in the UK or back in Italy or back in Switzerland or wherever the teams are based, and then the cars will the trucks with the cars on will arrive as the mechanics are there. The air freight's a little bit different. So the air freight will be all on. So F1 will charter the cargo flight. So it'll all go together normally to each event. Now, I'm just going to touch on Sao Paulo this year because the freight in Sao Paulo, which was, publicized as being a mess, it was quite a mess. So there was bad weather in Mexico. So one plane managed to leave Mexico with freight to Sao Paulo, which isn't enough. I mean, there must be 4 or 5 planes. So a lot of teams didn't get their freight, didn't even land in Sao Paulo until the Thursday. Bear in mind that the cars are on track Friday. So I'm going to hold that thought in your head for a second. I'm going to go back to what is a normal week. So the freight will arrive. Let's say the freight arrives on a Monday morning. So you start building, all of the items that you can't put in the sea freight. To give you some idea of numbers, if anyone wants to get a calculator out, back in, I know a couple of years ago, I think they were charging $225 per kilo of air freight. So if you've got something which weighs maybe half a ton, if you used to do that calculation of how much it costs to fly the item around the world for a season, what we do then is the item going to be used season after season? If the answer is yes, times that number by 3. Can you buy 6 or 7 sets of that equipment for that cost? If you can, that then will probably go into sea freight. So items like chairs and tables, Rob, you just said about, that's the reason why a lot of teams will sea freight that sort of stuff around. That's the reason why you have sea freight. So air freight normally is car items. So you're talking, obviously, the cars, toolboxes, pit stop equipment. You look in a garage, the overheads that go above each car, that normally be primarily air freight because they got so much technology in them. The center console, the engineers work, a lot of that in a lot of teams will be air freight because it's so bespoke to the garage. So you'll sort of set that equipment up on a Monday. Tuesdays, again, you finish off setting that equipment up. Wednesday, the mechanics are in. So the mechanics will start working on the cars on a Wednesday morning. The cars will normally take 2 days to be fully built. So on a Wednesday, they'll get the car sorted out. The cars don't come built up. So if you imagine a Formula One car, it will come as just a chassis, which is the item the driver sits in. So you think even the front suspension is very rarely going to be on the car. So it'll just come as a chassis. So that'll come out the box, go on its stand. Front end mechanic will start putting the front end together on a Wednesday. The engine guys around the back will start building the engine. The gearbox guys around the back will start building the gearbox. Normally by Wednesday night, the car will be somewhere near together. And then on the Thursday, you'll send the car to scrutineering in the morning and then run through a few system checks, make sure it's all very good, do pit stop practice. And then, there's a good 2 days work right there.
Wow. So I sort of always assumed the car just went from a race as is and then arrived at the next race they like polished it and then put fresh tires on and maybe took some pieces apart. I didn't think it came as just a chassis and they had to like redo it. That's wild.
Sometimes you can leave the things like the front suspension on, but I mean, each circuit can be different. So even like your internals inside the car, every item on a car is lifed. So if you can life a car pass to 600, 700 kilometers. So it might be that an internal part is only got 400 kilometers left on it of surface life. So are you going to do more than 400 kilometers that weekend? Yes, you need to change that part. That part will go back for service. So more often than not, you'll have a pretty significant rebuild of each car. Sometimes you can be lucky and the car can be pretty good. So, but more often than not, you'll have a pretty significant rebuild. So let's go back to how I started this conversation with the teams who didn't get their freight until the Thursday morning. So if you think now we've done Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we're just about ready to go with a car, which is 4 days, these poor teams had their equipment on the Thursday morning. So had to do 4 days work inside that day. And the FAA were really kind to them. So we have a curfew. So we're only allowed to work in between a certain hours. So if we're ever here on a race weekend, they broke curfew. That's why. So curfew might be 11 o'clock at night. So once 11 o'clock at night is around, you need to be at the circuit. And you're not allowed to come back out of the paddock. You're not allowed to come back into the paddock until 8 o'clock in the morning. in this situation, the FIA were really kind and said, okay, well, we won't have a curfew tonight. You guys can just work till wherever. So, yeah, we had people basically working near on 48 hours to try and get the cars on track for that Friday morning. So,
Wow.
yeah.
And we all know.
They were all on track, right? I don't think there's nobody.
Yeah. Oh, it was a huge effort. And
wow.
like, the other thing is, other teams who were more fortunate, when I say they helped out, they can't do a lot, but they can help. They can loan forklifts, little things like loaning forklifts, loaning pallet trucks, giving them people just to take their freight away. It's like, you imagine you can have 14 or 15, what we call air freight containers. So air freight containers are 3 meter by 2.5 meter sort of like boxes that are the size of a single story house. And you can have 14 of those. That's got all your equipment in. And even just other teams helping moving those down to their freight area just to try and help these guys out, because it honestly, it was great. So yeah, the effort to get those cars on the track for a Friday was great. And like I said, a lot of people maybe tuned into Friday practice, no idea that had happened.
Well, and so, Mercedes put a special engine in Lewis's car in Brazil too, right? You guys had enough time to turn it up to 11, because that thing was crazy how fast it was going. That was, as I joked, that was an engine undercut, and it was amazing.
It was a good weekend. That was, and like I said, if anyone, I'll always stick up for Lewis. But if anyone wanted any questions about how good he is, then you need to watch that weekend, because I mean, yes, okay, you can have a really good engine in the car. You can have a really good car. You still got to be that person who puts that car in the position you need to. And that's what makes the best. That's what makes Max and Lewis as good as they are. That's what makes Michael Schumacher as good as he was. That's what made Senna as good as he was. You look back through history, the standout drivers. It was those guys who, it's not the arguments about they've got the best car. I scratch my head at that sometimes, because, like, yes, okay, look, let's get it absolutely completely correct. Yes, they have a good car. We know that, but you have a good car because you earn a good car. You earn that right. In the world of football, again, I call it football because that's what it is. Lionel Messi plays for the best team, and he's the best player in the world because he's the best player in the world. The reason he's playing for the top teams is because he's the best. I don't know enough about NFL to really comment, but I'm quite sure you've got players at NFL who go and play for the better teams because they're the better players. It's, same as any sport. It's the nature of sport. So, but no, on races like that, and I think we saw in Istanbul 2020 with Lewis as well. Again, sometimes you have a guy who is that good. I think Max in 2020 Brazil, or it might be 2019, he was absolutely untouchable. It was, he drove. It's the reason these guys are so good. So yes, you can say the car, but the drivers does make a big effort.
It was amazing, and it was probably one of my favorite weekends to watch. But between having the sprint format that weekend, the qualifying, the penalty, the engine penalty, and then the wing, and then the way it came through in sprint, and then to the race, and then turn 4 on lap 48 or whatever it was with Max. I mean, it was for all the new fans watching. Paul's right. Definitely go check out the Brazil weekend rerun from 2021. It was tremendous. I do have one more question, because about this kind of period of time of a week. What happens with something like Valtteri's car for Monaco when the tire won't come off? Was that this year or last year, where it just got machined down and they couldn't get the wheel off, and he had to leave the race at that point? Were you able to get the wheel off, or did you have to ship it somewhere? Like, what do you do at that point?
No, so yeah, that was a bad one. Yeah, so that happens, and it's the same as anything. No one intends to make mistakes. It's one of those things. As a team, you learn from it. What happens
is it a mistake? I just assumed I mean, I don't know. I thought it just kind of got ground down and they couldn't get it off. I didn't.
No, it totally got ground down. There's a lot of things that go into a pit stop. The guy's working under huge pressure. It's pretty, it's pretty rare that anything bad happens. It was sadly a mistake, and it was just unfortunate. It's never happened before. No one's got any idea, really why it happened. But that's the world we live in, sadly. And that people, mistakes happen, and you've got to learn from it. The item went back to Brackley anyway because the car went back, and I think it took 4 or 5 days. There's actually quite a good meme around of the celebration when it finally came off, because it was quite a filmed event. It's quite comical. But yeah, it goes back, and our guys just machine it off. We analyze what's happened, the reason it's happened, and you make things better. It's one of those things we've used. We've used wheel nuts in the way that we've ran them for seasons upon seasons upon seasons. It was such a freak incident, but sadly, it's the nature of the game. It's the nature of the game. It happens.
I was going to say, to take it back to kind of mine and your sport of footy, right? Footy, football, soccer, whatever we're going to call it.
Or call soccer. Paul said you can't call it that.
I can't call it soccer, no. I always think the pit stop guys are a little bit like the goalkeeper, because their mistakes are highlighted more. Striker misses a goal, he might get one a few minutes later, right? A bit like a driver misses an apex, he might get it sorted later. So the drivers are the strikers, right? The pit stop for me are the goalkeepers, because when somebody hits that back pass and he goes to stop it and it goes under his foot and it's a goal, he's got nowhere to hide. Everyone sees the mistake.
Exactly. Do you know what, with pit stops? You practice so many times. You'll do a pit stop practice on a Thursday. You'll do on a Friday. You'll do one every. You'll probably do near 150, probably more than 50 or 60, to be honest with you, per weekend. Wow. Practice probably more towards 80. You practice. When you're back at the factory, and every team does it. Every team's got their own little thing. So teams will have their own pit stop setups back in their factories, where the guys will come in and they'll just work on it constantly trying to improve themselves. That's why when you see incidents, and every team has them, you see any team that has an issue. It's the annoying thing. You are exactly right. You are correct in every way, Rob. It is highlighted so badly if a pit stop goes wrong. Sometimes when a pit stop goes wrong, if it's down to tires, if it's down to the wrong tires going on the car, that's a whole bigger issue. That could be there's so many different reasons why that can happen. If it's an issue with a gun sticking, if it's an issue with a gun jamming, if it's an issue with a wheel nut that's maybe faulty and machined, go back to Monaco. It literally, it's unavoidable, and you don't know it's going to happen until it happens. And you can practice as much as you like. Yeah, you are right. When it goes wrong, I was involved in one weirdly in qualifying in Monaco. I can't remember the year. It was Nico. So I'm going to go on to just quickly. I'm going to skirt onto qualifying. So qualifying, you have two car crews. You have a qualifying pit stop crew for each car. So whereas you normally have your pit stop crew with the whole team, obviously in qualifying, if one crew is working on the car in a garage and the other car needs a service, you actually have a bespoke pit stop crew, which is less people, but a similar process. So you're sort of trained on your quali crew as well. I can remember in Monaco, I was I had to go and get the wheel, basically. Get the wheel, take the other wheel off, put the wheel on. So a wheel off man, a gun man, and a wheel on man. Qualifying, you have a gun man and a wheel on, wheel off man. I was that man. As I got the tyre, Nico appeared in the pit box completely unannounced. He didn't say he was coming in. And then as so the engineer straight, okay, this set of tyres. So I ran out the back, grabbed the set of tyres, run out to the car. As I'm running to the car, the gunman, I won't mention his name, is running the other way. So, okay, where are you going? Get to the car. All the other tyres are going on fine. I'm sat there in my tyre, looking around, no sign of my gunman. at that point, you've just got to take, you've just got to, you're no good waiting. The time is crucial. So I just picked up the gun, was a bit of a hero. I got my cape and my medal for it, took the wheel off myself, done everything myself, and then put the wheel on, sent the car, and then the gunman was just sat at the back of the garage, just looked at me and went, "I've got no idea what I was doing. I'm sorry." I was like, it happens. And it's, it happens in life. Pit stops can go wrong, but it can go wrong from a lot of reasons. It can go wrong for drivers, can go wrong through the engineers, and go wrong through the pit stop crew. I've been involved in some before where the chief mechanic has let the car go too early. And, I can remember Australia when we used to do refueling. I was the right front wheel at the time. So the fueling equipment was to my left. And I just remember doing the tire, and then you're just waiting for the car to leave. I saw the car leaving. I also saw the fuel man going with the car as well. It just wiped us all out as it went through, big fuel spillage. When they go wrong, they're pretty bad, because as you can imagine.
It is fascinating. So in not my current job, but the one prior, I had about 60 people in a conference room, and we had a high-priced set of consultants with us, who is the biggest name brand in the consulting world for business for what I do. And they wanted to talk about how we were going to orchestrate this next thing. So I got these 60 people, all senior leaders of my company, and myself and this consulting firm, and they bust out an F1 pit stop, and they show it from above, and they take it apart, and they try to explain how we are going to be this well-oiled machine in life insurance that will rival an F1 pit stop. And they didn't know squadouche about what was actually happening in the pit stop. And I'm dying laughing in the back. Like, you should have shown me this first, because this is totally wrong. And I still don't know, 4% of what you do, but I knew enough to know they didn't know anything. And I saved it there. And so what I would say is, you mentioned how it's noticed when something goes wrong. The reason is because it is probably the greatest spectacle in sport, is to watch a car come in and get serviced in 2 seconds. It is wild. And to watch these people who are brilliant, don't understand F1, but understand the amount of practice and work and orchestration required. It was fascinating to me to watch that. I do have a qualifying question for you. Am I wrong? But do people wear different clothes, like not fire suits? It feels like I've watched people in qualifying in like shorts at times, or short sleeve shirts. It feels different than the normal race attire for the pit crew. Am I right or wrong? Am I crazy?
No, it's debatable on the crazy, but no, you're not wrong. It's exactly that. So you only really wear race suits on actually for the race. Why? I mean, that's one for the F1 gods, I guess. But qualifying, no, you don't. Some teams decide they're going to use full suits, other teams don't. I think it's just optional on the team. To be fair, the likelihood of you ever doing a pit stop live in the box in qualifying is pretty rare. You normally see that if there's a red flag. So if a qualifying session gets halted, then you might see that. But qualifying is normally pretty well planned. So it's pretty to the time. So one of the things you mentioned, Rob, was that in qualifying we just sit down and watch the cars go around. I mean, honestly,
that's all you do, right?
Yeah, no, it's so qualifying's really, really hard for the. I'll speak of it from a tire guy perspective. So, you could be using 8 sets of tires in a qualifying session, and you think each of those sets of tires, you've got to get they're up to temperature. You got to do the pressures. You got to do the tire bleeds. You put a set of tires on the car. That set of tires will need, you'll set a cold tire pressure in the morning. Depending on what temperature it is outside, you'll set a cold tire pressure. That's based on a graph of where they want what they call the target on-track tire pressure to be. So that'll all be calculated down. You could be talking you're taking 0.6, 0.7 out of the tire. But you'll have to do that before it goes on the car, before it goes on the track, should I say, not so much on the car. When the car comes in, you need to check the tire pressures, then record what they came in at, because that's important then if they ever need to be run again. So as a tire man, you are hectic. It's probably the worst you will have during the entire weekend. Mechanics, pretty much the same. Because 50 minutes for qualifying, the car will go out, it'll do one time lap run. So it'll take 2 minutes to get out, 2 minutes to get back. Let's say 1 minute 30 for your lap. That's 5 minutes, 5.5 minutes, times out by 2, because you're going to do 2 runs. So you're talking 11 minutes. So you've only got 4 minutes really of making sure the car's good to go in the garage, if you think of it like that. So it's qualifying can be really hectic. It's the most hectic time for the guys in the garage. It's pretty intense. And then again, like we said, if you have a red flag, it's the worst. Wet weather actually is probably even worse, because wet weather, you can send the car out and the car will just stay out, keep doing lap after lap after lap. But if it's wet, dry, you'll just keep coming in and changing tires. Or honestly, qualifying is pretty hard. For the guys, it's pretty hard.
It's a good job we got an expert guest on there, because it shows how much I know.
No. Do you know what? That's the thing. Free practice that you do on a Friday. That's all about setting the car up for your weekend ahead. So you'll do your fuel runs. You'll do your tire data. So you'll send the car out on a long lap. You'll be able to measure your tire wear based on how much you think that tire is going to do during a long stint. So again, just like your road car, you measure the tread of the tire, which even on the slicks, you can measure the tread. There are little hole indicators on the tire. If you ever see a tire close up, you'll see a series of holes that go across them. Same thing. That will give you a guide how long that tire is going to last. So you got a fair idea. And then, like I said, doing fuel runs. Then you do your quali simulations. You'll do practice. Yeah, there's a lot goes into practice. Basically, setting you up for the weekend, getting yourself ready for qualifying, getting your tire data sorted out, getting your fuel data sorted out, working on setups, wing settings, yada yada. Engine set. There's a lot goes into what goes on the practice. So when they do the sprint races, and they do 2 practices, then quali, or was it 1 practice? I should know that, shouldn't I?
Yeah, you should really. Yeah, we'll forgive you. It's a new format, right? It's only this year, right? So but
exactly. When you do a sprint weekend, obviously, you need to run more on a practice session, and that's why I go back to weekends that sometimes are wet. If it's wet on a Friday and dry on a Saturday and Sunday, that's why you don't really see a lot of cars going out on track, because it's pointless data. You're not learning anything going out. So that's why if you ever go somewhere that's wet on a Friday, no cars are going out. That's genuinely the reason why. There's no point. If it's wet all weekend, you'll definitely go and run and see what's going on with tires and get a decent level of the car. As a whole, no, it's Friday practice are really important. Quali is a busy time for the guys. Quali is absolutely hectic. You can't wait for it to be over.
So when it is over, we've practiced, qualifications, qualifying's over. You know where your guys are going to be tomorrow.
Wait, I have one more quali question.
Go on. Sorry,
one more
Brian,
quali question. What is the theory behind every team effectively having the same approach to timing to send the cars out with, just enough time to get one last lap in, that right before, get around before the checkered flag, get one last lap in, because they all do it the same. And if it's drizzling, they go early, get a banker lap in just to be safe. But it felt to me, especially watching it on TV this year, like there was more just queue problems, just queue management coming around the last corner before the straight in qualifying than ever before. and everyone goes out at the same time. Wouldn't it be beneficial? I recognize the track gets more rubbered in and the temperature changes and this, that, and the other, but it's 2 minutes. I mean, we're talking 2 minutes. Wouldn't it be better to go out 2 minutes earlier when there's not a traffic jam? And yes, I recognize you may catch the traffic jam then on your hot lap, and I get that too. So go 4 minutes. I don't know. I know there are people way smarter than me who know this better than me and have computers and machines, but everyone goes out at the same time. It just creates a traffic jam.
It does. And you know what? There are people far smarter than me. You actually answered it. To be honest with you, it's all about, you want to be the last car out there because that's when the track's going to be at its grippiest, its best. So you always want to be the last car. If you're the first car, you saw either things like getting a toe off the car in front. Like your quali 3, you'll normally have the worst of that. Quali 1, quali 2, your faster cars will normally be through. So you'll have the same traffic jam, but with the cars more down towards the back. It is a problem. It's something which, has caught people out once or twice now. And, it's entertaining. I mean, there are rules actually in place that say that you've got to be X, Y, Z with the car in front, car behind. You've got to be it. But it's never really that well policed. And I don't know how they can police it, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's all about the track evolution, if you like. And you just want to be the last car on there. That's when the track is going to be at its best.
I always watch it.
It's as simple as that. It's I know what you're saying. I completely get you. If you're, you want to be the last car. It's quite funny when you're watching it and they're all sort of like jostling. You're like,
right.
Oh, it's just going to be a crash in a minute. It's all going to be. But you say in the wet's a little bit different because in the wet you've got the chances of a yellow flag is so high, and if you have a yellow flag, that's your lap ruined. So teams would rather go, like you said, go get a banker lap first. In the wet, sometimes it works a little bit different. The better conditions might be at the start when the track's a little bit wetter, before the cars have run around it. Inter tires in that situation, in your intermediate tire, for instance, will as we saw it again, go back to Turkey 2020 with Lewis. Your inter tire can be a really good tire, once that track hits a certain condition. Whether you'll get that in qualifying, you're never going to get your inter tire worn down, I guess, to that level anyway. So yeah, your preference is to go out early and just get a good lap on a new decent set of inters rather than run that risk of a yellow flag, because in those conditions, the cars are a lot more equally matched. So yeah, that's why you'll sort of see the opposite in a wet one where a lot of teams try and go early and get their laps in. That's why wet qualifying is actually quite entertaining.
I couldn't agree more. And I think for all the new fans listening, Paul's right. I think go back to Turkey 2020. Check out, so Formula One does a race recap. It's normally about 8 minutes long. They did a special extended one for Turkey. It was 18 minutes. I've watched it many times. That's how I know exactly how long it is. And they did a special one. I would actually say just go watch the whole race and weekend. Lewis was masterful. And I believe, if I got this right, this is where he ended up finishing on the inters that he'd effectively turned into slicks that were just totally down the middle bald when he pulled into the end. And it was a masterclass in driving. It was great to watch. And I know I for one, would highlight that as well. Brazil this year, 2021, it's another one we've highlighted, but 2 race weekends, which were just tremendous. Rob, I'm sorry I cut you off, man. I had to ask that question because every week I watch and I just tear my hair out. I go, someone go 2 minutes earlier.
I'm just playing time cop and keeping this wagon rolling, Brian. That's
yeah.
So I was just gonna say, so we're before we launch into race day itself. So qualification is over. You know where your guys are lining up tomorrow, whether they're on pole, whether they're kind of in the midfield somewhere, whether they got a penalty in there or at the back. How much are you involved in? I imagine what happens between now and the race starting in my head is this big powwow where a whole bunch of strategy crap goes on and people start talking about how many stops and what the different how much is that a team thing, or is that like the Jedi Council of the team go and sort that out and you find out the instructions the next morning? What happens from when qualification is over to when kind of we see the TV coverage starting on race day?
So no strategy. You'll have a strategy group that will be based on the track and back at the factories. So you'll always have a direct intercom link to each factory. So you'll have like a race support room that will house another whole bunch of engineers back at your factory that will be they're basically a live monitor of what's going on trackside. Even a car telemetry is pretty much live back there. And then again, they'll have so many different scenarios that have computer data. They'll be able to virtually simulate every scenario that will possibly happen. Go back to Friday practice. So what, you're sort of watching every other team as well. So you get a fair idea of what every other team's doing on their time. So you can sort of get a gist of what times other teams will do. So you can sort of formulate a decent, like a decent idea of how the race is going or should pan out. So again, if a race is just a bog standard race, bog standard dry race, start to finish, you're starting on your medium tire. That's going to do 30 laps, and then your soft tire is going to do 10 laps, and your hard tire is going to do 50 laps. There's no point going medium soft. You probably can go medium hard, but then every team's going to do that who starts on medium tire. Tire strategy is probably the one. It's probably the one that's the most important. That's why you see so many people saying, look after your tires. If you can go longer, as you've seen, sometimes they'll put a hard tire on, or you can go medium. It's your strategy. You'll always have 3 or 4 scenarios about how the day's going to run out. We're never involved in that. That's a strategy group. That's even away from the drivers. They'll come out with those plans. Then they'll sit down with the drivers and the core engineers, the core management. Be okay. These are our scenarios, and then they'll all discuss that. As for being in the garage from a mechanic side, you very rarely know what the strategy is going to be, even when it comes to the race. You're going to have an idea. You know what your tire order is going to be because you're given a proposed tire order, but that could change depending on. As you see time after time, they might change when the car comes in. They might, so no, needless to say, your strategy is a pretty secretive area. So okay. Your chief strategist will have that in his head. He'll know what he's doing. And they'll have scenarios for different options. They'll have scenarios for safety car lap run. When they say on the radio that he's in their pit window, or what they'll know that they'll have all the information at hand, whether it's at the track or back at the factory. They'll have the information being fed to them constantly. They'll be sat there and someone will be like, we can pit now and come out here. So you're on about strategy. Strategy is a lot of people in a team. It's, you have your chief strategist, but you have people back in your factories on each team who are all sat there just looking at strategy, just watching what other cars are doing.
Okay, so you've kind of already touched on kind of the pit stop stuff already as part of qualification and kind of what we talked about already. But what's a good place to go now then, I think, is, and it works, the fact you guys don't know the strategy that much, the tire orders. The thing I always find amazing is when obviously what must get sprung on you guys is that something is changing. And suddenly the set of tires you thought you were putting on, you see the guys running around the garage going and picking a different set of tires up. And I guess you find out literally seconds before the chief strategist decided, or is it minutes, hours? I mean, how far ahead? It's crazy sometimes when they're running around getting the new sets of tires ready. Assured teams, I can only speak from my experience. We've always been pretty good. Normally, you'll just get a message: be prepared to swap to tire set bar. And then, like I said, going down, you'll have done all your pressure. You've done your bleed, you bleed down tire pressure. Everything's good to go. So then it's just a case, really, like it's you might be told not to make it obvious that you're looking at doing a pit stop. That's always a good one, and like you've got to try and make that's always, and like I don't know how sometimes that's how obvious. I don't know how, but yeah, you could be seeing, you can go. You're not allowed to nowadays, but back in the day, you could go to the pit box, try and make the other team come in, so you think you're pitting. Again, you think of the undercut. So
yeah, you have those different situations. You can have a last minute panic, of course, that can happen. More often than not, your tires are going to be lay under the pod anyway for the tire collectors and mechanics to take to the car. They're going to be in the garage anyway. The next set of tires, they're not really ever going to be that far away. So unless there's a really big meltdown, it's normally pretty relaxed. In all honesty, the whole thing with pit stops, the whole thing with all that, it's so relaxed. You don't even doing the pit stops. You said there 2 seconds. They feel like 6 or 7 when you're doing them. You're doing that. I know it says blasé, it's not. But when you've done them that often, you just sort of like, oh, okay. You know when something's gone wrong. You know when something's a little bit slow. But on the whole, that you practice that many times. And you practice, you say that, Rob, it's a good point. But you practice that scenario when you're doing pit stop practice also. You'll practice being out in the box, and then they'll choose another set of tires that's in the garage. So they'll all run back in the garage and run back out. Even silly things like the guys on the other side of the car not running across the pit box. So if the car's coming in, they're running around. So you practice every scenario possible. So in that moment, yeah, okay, it does happen. It can happen. But normally you've practiced it. So you should be pretty up to speed.
So then I know I'm maybe leeching into the questions that we're going to do some quick fire questions after we finish this bit. But do you remember the first time you were in the pit lane looking up and watching your first car approaching you, coming in to stop?
Yeah, so do you know what? The first time, so I used to do front jack, which was quite entertaining. But the first time I actually did that was with Michael Schumacher, and we were doing a filming event in Barcelona. And I was positioned down the back of the right down the end of the start-finish straight. And Michael, basically, he was testing brakes, I think. Actually, it may not have been a filming event. It might have been testing, but whatever it was, his job was to go flat out, come down to the end where we were, and then we'd stop, jack him up, put him on wheelie boards, turn around, send it back up the pit straight the wrong way. Now, Barcelona is the pit straight goes, and then it sort of like drops down towards the first corner. So when you're down by the first corner, you can't see the pit straight until he's come over the top of the hill. All you can hear is this almighty noise, and like you're completely aware he's coming at you pretty quick. And yeah, little old me on the front jack sat there waiting, and he came. Oh, I think that's the closest I've come to crying at the track before is when he came. It was so fast, and he coming around like, Harris, why are you backing away? I'm like, what? Seriously? Like, I'm fairly sure it was brake testing. So he obviously hammering on the brakes in the last minute. Oh, petrified. You get used to it. I've been knocked over. I've been drove into. Yeah, you get used to it. It only hurts for a couple of minutes. Normally, I've seen some bad accidents in pit stops. Some really bad accidents in pit stops. And when that happens, your heart goes out to the people who have been hurt. I've seen some pretty serious ones. Luckily, touch wood, we've not had that. I've not had it with any of our guys as such. One of our guys got run over one time, and on the back of his race suit, he had tire marks off his back, which was just, for me, the funniest thing. Like, you know what I mean?
I love the compassion.
But, yeah. No, we've had, you get people hurt. It happens. It does happen. It's one of those jobs that, when you get hurt in that situation, you can get hurt pretty bad. Luckily, I don't think we've had anything really major, but it is scary. When you say how scary is it? Yeah. The first few times you do it, yes, it's scary. And the first few times that you are, Monaco is probably the worst when the other cars are going up the pit lane a foot behind you, and it's pretty intimidating.
Well, Paul, you kind of
come on to that shortly. The worst and the favorite tracks and that kind of stuff. Sorry, Brian, do you have a question?
Well, I was going to move to the favorite tracks because.
Oh, okay. I was going to say. So, I mean, mindful of time, because we could speak to you for a couple of hours probably, but we've got to try to squidge this in. So, I think. The kind of the packing up after the race, we maybe I think we're going to ask some questions about best and worst jobs that you've got as part of the job. So if there's any part of packing up which is bad, we can touch that then. But I think we've got kind of like 12, 14 questions. We'll try and quick fire them, and answer as honestly as you can, Paul. And if you're not allowed to answer one, then we'll understand.
No problem.
So do you want to take it away, Brian, with the first couple?
Yeah, let's do the first couple here. So you mentioned, Spain, and you talked about a couple of different tracks as we've gone through this, wet, dry, and tight pit lanes in Monaco. And I guess I'd ask, what's your worst or least favorite track, and then favorite track? And this can be broad. So it can be the social life outside of it. It can be the track action. But where do you get excited when you're holding a ticket, or at least on your phone, a boarding pass for, and where do you go, oh gosh, I got to go here again?
Yeah, so I get asked this question quite a lot. I'm going to break it into two. I'm going to break it into work and fun, because they need to make sure these two are separated. So from a work perspective, I would say Silverstone is going to be the best, because I'm home in 5 minutes. There's nothing. And the garages are huge. It's brilliant. Belgium is fantastic. Big garages. Where it's a lovely area. And Bahrain is superb also. It's a really nice circuit. It's really easy to work at. So from a work perspective, they'd be the best ones. The worst, I hate to say it, Austin. It's so small. It's just not, it's so small, the garage area in Austin. It's such a shame. So I'm gonna go Austin, Monaco again. The glitz and glamour Monaco, just logistically is hard work. Everything's hard work. And Holland, and again, the only reason again is just the facilities that you work in, and they've done a good job there trying to make them a little bit bigger in Zandvoort, but even that, just logistically, just the sheer size of F1 compared to what you have to work with.
So before you jump onto fun, just very, very quick story. Monaco. My wife, in her degree, she studied down in southern France for 6 months, and I went down to visit her one weekend. She was based in Nice, and we went on a bus and we went to Monaco. And when we got off the bus in Monaco, we didn't really know where to go. So I said, "Oh, follow me. Let's start walking." Because I noticed there were those little the little kind of barrier kind of manhole covers that they must pop out to drop the barriers into on race weekend. So I'm kind of like following these things, because it looks, as much as I thought I would recognize it when I was there, when it's not race weekend, it kind of looks totally different. So we're kind of walking, and I'm like, let's go down this street. And she was like, how do you know your way around? And then we came around, I think it's the hotel corner, the one that you always have the camera up high, and it's the hairpin going down before the tunnel, right? And as we came around that corner, I didn't know those red and white curbstones are there all year round. And as soon as my wife saw those, she went, "You've got us walking the track, haven't you?" Yeah. I was totally busted. But after we did that, and when we walked through the tunnel, which is way longer to walk through than cars take to go through it, we got up to where the pit lane area is. It is so small. I could not believe that all the teams can fit into that area. It blew my mind. And I know in the past over Facebook, we kind of traded like, "Oh, my heart bleeds. Paul's going to Monaco again. Must be a disaster." And you've always said it's just so cramped there.
Yeah, it's got a lot better recently. They've really improved the actual garages. I know, so silly. They put another level on the garages, so they're now 3-story. I mean, when we first went there, they were just single-story units, and all of your equipment was in a multi-story car park about a quarter of a mile away. You had to drag everything in on quad bikes like each morning. So it's got a lot better, but still, just logistically, you think at a racetrack we'll have maybe 4 trucks sat at the back of the garages that have, office space for people. None of those are there in Monaco. You don't have that. So it's a fantastic place, but just logistically, everything about it's hard. Fun events. I'm going to redeem myself with your US fans by saying that Austin is probably going to be the standout one for being fun. We stay right on 6th Street, and if anyone's been to Austin and they know, so Austin, Melbourne, obviously, and then Canada. We again in Montreal City.
yeah,
fantastic.
Absolutely, I love Montreal.
Absolutely grateful. Yeah, great fun. Worst, it's probably, China. Shanghai's it's a good city, but okay. Saudi Arabia, first time we went there, absolutely, great place, but just no alcohol. I mean, you need a beer after a day of work here. And I'd probably say Russia, to be honest with you. And again, Russia's not all that bad. But I'd probably go for Russia just because, I'd have to go there.
It's almost as though when you go to Saudi Arabia, you have Kimmy's engineer.
You will not have the drink.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to get one sound in. You'll not have the drink. So I did. I'm curious to see where Miami will enter. This season, obviously, the 23rd race is in Miami, the Miami International Autodrome. I actually did a recon this last week. I dragged my family. I was in South Florida, and I dragged my family down to the track. And obviously, being nobody from nowhere, I could only get so far. I am pretty good at bribing my way into places. So I actually got to watch. And for anybody who's listening and a big fan, if you take Florida's Turnpike from the south towards the Hard Rock Stadium, get off at the stadium exit, you will actually go over, and I'll talk about this in a subsequent podcast, but you'll go over a good portion of the track elevated, and you can see it. And then if you circle around to the Dolphins practice area, you'll actually see turn 17 and the back straight right in front of you, and you can kind of check it out. They don't take kindly if you say, hey, can I just drive on top of the track in my rental car? They'll actually turn you away quite quick. But Miami's nightlife and South Beach, I think will actually be a lot of fun for a lot of folks.
We're looking forward to that one. We are looking forward to that one.
Yeah. And I actually have a friend who owns a couple hotels on South Beach. And I told him one day he's got to give me a room at a decent rate when this podcast takes off. And then he stopped answering my texts. So I guess, Paul, I'd ask, you talked about some of the tracks, work versus fun. What about celebrities that you've either been sort of starstruck by or most unexpectedly fun guests in the garage? Because you see in the background, you'll see, whether it's Ben Stiller or, Matthew McConaughey. All right. You got all these different people kind of queuing in the back of the garages at times, families and friends. And I guess I'd just be curious, and obviously don't highlight any you didn't like, because we don't need to do that, but highlight some of the positives that stand out for you.
Being stood in the garage and Prince Harry walking in was pretty huge. That was like, wow. Wow. And then I know this is a really weird one, and I think it's just because we're British, but David Beckham, it's just a human that just walks in. You just look at him and you just think perfection. And there's no, he didn't even play for my team in the English Premier League. So I don't know why. He's such an icon in the UK though. He always has that. He was at a race this year, and it was quite funny to see. Even people have seen him before. Everyone wanted to get photographs with him. So I'd say Prince Harry and David Beckham would be the two which would really stand out for me. As the most unexpected fun one, James Corden. He was. He came over to do a bit of a pit stop challenge thing with us. We have a charity event in the UK called Sports Relief, and he came over to do some work with us. And he was grabbing. We glued his trainers to the wall, stole his jeans. He was brilliant fun. He was actually. Yeah, he was a really good guy. And again, he was just down to earth, completely level. He was really good. So yeah, I'd say James Corden.
One thing, Rob had his little Monaco story. I'm going to quickly tell my David Beckham story. I have family all throughout the US, and I have a cousin. I have a lot of family in LA. And so I have a cousin there, and she has boys who play soccer. Well, yeah, I'm US. I can call it soccer.
Yeah, you're fine.
Just deal with it. You got it. I'm in my country and I'm using my language.
We're all happy with that. It's
Rob. It's Rob. Exactly. It's his problem. And so on their soccer team was one of the Beckham children. And so my cousin's ex-husband was the coach. And so they had the team over one day to my cousin's house to celebrate a win or whatever, as teams often do. And the parents came along, and it was kind of impromptu after sort of end of the season thing. And so my cousin, as a good American, offered everybody a drink, and Victoria Beckham said, I'll have some tea. And my cousin's like, oh no. And she looked in the cabinet, and all there was Lipton instant tea. And she said, would this do? And Victoria's like, sure, that'll be fine. And my cousin was horrified at the fact that she's serving the Beckhams Lipton instant tea is all she had. And anyhow, that's my Beckham story. I will just
say from an English perspective, making tea something I've seen over here in the USA. I mean, I don't know, Rob, if you've got a similar tea experience, but I mean, I shake my head at the inability to make a good old fashioned proper tea, like cup of tea. And it's world over. It's not just here. No matter where we go in the world, you ask someone for a cup of tea. There's no etiquette, is there, Rob, with the tea bag? It's disgraceful, to be honest. But
right.
I know.
So that's my Beckham story. My cousin Elisa, I love her very much, but she got caught out on that one.
That's a good story. Right, now getting back on track, pun intended. You mentioned gluing James Corden's trainers or sneakers to wherever you glued them to. So, pit lane pranks, probably that you're allowed to tell us about, because I imagine there's a whole bunch of what goes on tour stays on tour. But what are some of the best things? You guys must get up to stuff.
Yeah, we do. To be honest with you, one of the pit lane favorites, and you'll have this with a lot of teams, is the new boy. Whoever comes along who's not been to the track before will have to go and collect an air sample, which basically involves them with a bin bag, and they'll run down the pit lane with a bin bag open, collecting a sample of air, and they get to the end and then sort of tie it up, and then like, no, mate, you've got to do it the same height as the car roll hoop. Oh, okay, so they empty the bag of air out and then do it again, back up, and you always knew there's a new boy when you see someone randomly running down the pit lane with a bin bag collecting, where you just sort of like, oh, bless him. But everyone joins in. Every team goes out, no, you're doing it wrong. You got to go a little bit lower. And they're like, oh, okay, is this good? And like, that can be hilarious. Yeah,
that's the equivalent of sending the new lad for a tin of tartan paint. That's
yeah. And it's the greatest, and they look so proud when they got this bin bag full of air, and you're like, oh no. Yeah, it's a pit lane favorite. That one is.
Did you have to fill a bag for an air sample, or were you spared that?
No, I was stupid enough. They didn't need to prove it. They had enough on me by that time. I can assure you about doing that one.
Okay, I'm gonna jump over. I think you kind of touched on the race events and kind of the places that were good to go parties. So, other than collecting air in a bag, what's the worst job that you've ever had to do?
I'm gonna being a tire man in Monaco, because there's no garage space. If you think of a set of tires on a stack on a trolley, you can have 40 sets of tires, for instance. You can have, let's say 40 sets of tires. You think the floor space alone that takes up? You don't have that floor space in Monaco at all. Not only that, when you say get tire processing. So when you get your tires from Pirelli, you then got to take them, do the pressures on them, mark them all up, paint all the little driver logos on, yada yada, put them in blankets. All of that is done probably a mile and a half from the actual garage in Monaco, down on the harbour. About 3/4 of a mile in between that and your garage are actually Pirelli. So even if you have a tyre that's got an issue with the garage, you've got to walk. It takes you. It's probably about a 30-minute round trip just to walk to Pirelli. So being a tyre man in Monaco is just the worst. You actually have quad bikes there with trailers that each team takes just to try and cart tyres back and forward. Probably that Sao Paulo packing up. Every team's trying to pack up in Sao Paulo, and I can't even begin to explain it to you. But it's something that you would never believe if anyone went to sit it. Like, as I said, you have 15 of these air freight pallets that are 3 meters by 2.5 meters, and each team's got similar. So you're talking each team after the race trying to get, let's say, 120. That's probably a bit much, but let's say 100 of those up one single road on forklifts up a hill. Oh, and the forklifts keep running out of gas. And honestly, Brazil back up, and it always rains. So yeah, we'll move on before I start having a breakdown on just the thought of a Brazil backup.
Brian, do you want to hit the driver stuff?
Yeah, I do. A couple questions for you, Paul. And
yeah,
there's sort of two ways to look at it, right? Some drivers get a bad rap in the press, but they're actually good guys. And some of the drivers, you can kind of tell they're fun. But I guess I'd ask both. Who do you see gets maybe not the right appreciation in the press for who they are, and then who's kind of fun regardless of how they're perceived, just fun to be around that you've noticed?
I'd stick I'd stick with Lewis personally. I mean, I don't know how the press portray him over here, for instance, but I mean, back in the UK and not only the press, some of the comments some of the people who target him, he divides opinion. I get that, but he's a good guy. That's he does a lot for different things, and I think the way that Lewis is genuinely seen sometimes is probably a little bit harsh. I'd probably stick that. I mean, the drivers are all, they're normally all good guys. There's no one really for me who, I think the criticism of of Mazepin. I know the Mazepin website you mentioned last pod. It was, it is. We used to have one with back in the day, Pastor Maldonado.
Yeah.
I can't remember what his name was, but yeah, again with him, it was just, and again, Nikita's he's a good guy. They're all good people. They're just
come on, Paul. You've worked with a number of drivers. Which is the one that has just made you laugh the most? And you don't have to pick a favorite, but I always, me, just from the outside looking in, just always thought that Jenson Button was a good laugh, but I got no idea. He could have been as dry as a pancake. But it was the one that made you laugh the most as part of your kind of daily work.
Rubens Barrichello would be up there, very much. He was. I got some stories I could tell for Rubens that they give this podcast new meaning, but he was a genuinely good guy. Michael Schumacher, again, I think for me, and the only reason I'll choose Schumacher more so is, again, I don't think the public really would assume that Michael would be that sort of funny guy, but he was brilliant to work with. He was great fun. He was laughing, joking. He was a genuinely. It shocked me. I was when it shocked me because you always look at Michael, you just think, well, it's Michael Schumacher, he's this serious guy who's got, he's just a robot of a man. And he came in, he was completely different. He was just such a laugh. He was, and he was a heart of gold. Like he put everyone's in the team, he put their photograph on the wall in his driver room. He'd learn everything about them. He'd learn their kids' names. He'd go up to them in the garage. We're like, he's completely different to what people think. So I'd say Michael. I can remember one time, I will tell a story. We have this thing in the garage. I don't know why it's a thing, because it's not really funny. But you'd walk up to someone, and if they're not covering their crotch area, you would just backhand them in the knackers, for one of the better phrase. And it's a pit lane thing. So like you might even, if you ever get a chance to watch anything F1 on TV, see if you can look out for it. If you see anyone walking past someone, a natural thing is to cover themselves up. It was Barcelona one time. Michael stopped after a session on the weighbridge, walked back up the garage. I was a tyre man, so I was waiting outside the garage. He walked past me, and I was like, all good? He went, yep, and hit me so hard in the knackers. The entire grandstand cheered opposite, so I just sunk to my knees and completely sort of like, oh. There's nothing you can say. Like there's nothing, the bloke's a legend. He's an absolute living legend. I couldn't say anything because I couldn't talk. But yeah,
you got punched in the crotch by Michael Schumacher.
Quite a few times. But the one in the pit lane in Barcelona, I mean, it was the grandstand opposite cheering. You don't cheer a moment like that. I was in agony.
I've always been a Schumacher or Schumi sort of fan, and not just for his, but he's always seemed like a good guy. But to hear your stories reinforces that. He put pictures in his driver room to learn about the team. I mean, that's amazing to me, and will reinforce my appreciation of him.
He's a massive family man. His family was first. He was kind. He like everything about him, and he's one of those people. Some people say, do you ever want to meet your hero? He wasn't a hero of mine. He always used to comment about being, a 7-time world champion. I just openly tell him, mate, you're only 6. You never had 94 with Damon Hill. Come on. And he'd have a right laugh about it. And he'd be like, he'd always say to me, all he had to do was wait. And if we're ever having a conversation as a team and someone would say, oh, you're a 7-time champion, I'd always shout out 6. And, we just laugh at it. But he was honestly, funny guy. I
Yeah.
could tell you so many Michael stories, but we're gonna run out of time, I'm sure. So that'll be for another time. I'd love to want to get in and go through some of this. I really want.
Oh, that would be brilliant. We got to do that. And you know what? You can see it when you say Family Man. You can see it in Mick. And F1 does these things. I don't know if you ever have time to even watch them when they post them on YouTube, but they interview the drivers and they kind of go around, and they did one of naming the champs backwards from today back to 1950. And by the way, Sebastian, I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but it blows your mind. But so when they got to Mick, he basically said, "Oh, this is great. I just want to make it to my dad." And so he got through. And then when he got up to all of the 7 or 6 in your estimation, but 7 championships, he would just say, my dad. And you could see, like, it like warmed my heart. I almost cried watching a current F1 driver. And he was so proud to say my dad in those spots. It was like awesome to me. And I watched the Schumacher documentary on Netflix. If people haven't watched that, check it out. It is fantastic. Obviously, it's just a portion of time and a portion of the view, but you really get a bit of a feel for his love of his family. So check that out as well. We'll plug for Netflix. So Rob, 1 or 2 more, and then we gotta wrap it up with Paul here.
We're going to be pushing on a long old episode here, and being as Paul has already kind of been kind enough to say he doesn't mind coming back on again. I think let's maybe wrap up with best and worst memories so far of F1 for you. Just before you answer it, my best. It was always surreal seeing you on TV, right? Whether it was that moment spraying Lewis with champagne, whether it was just the end of every race when they used to come running over and like there you were. It was just. That blew my mind, but you know which clip I'm going to say is my favorite of all time.
Yes.
And I'm gonna put a link in the if I can, maybe in the podcast notes so that everybody can see this. But it's a moment where you're up on the gantry, I think, next to Toto.
Yeah, that was Monaco. Yeah,
Monaco, was, just shooting the breeze. I think the TV camera must have come on to that moment because Nico had come and joined Toto up on the gantry, wasn't it?
It was Valtteri. So I was chatting to Valtteri. And then, someone comes stood next to me. I didn't pay any attention. As I looked, it was Toto, which is fine. Toto's completely fine. And I sort of like, we're on the middle four. So as I looked down, there was this whole bank of photographers and TV cameras all of a sudden pointing up at us. So I sort of like, So I thought I can just sneak out the way and no one will notice. And then, Rob, back to you.
So anybody that has ever seen The Simpsons and has seen the famous meme of Homer Simpson backing into a hedge to try to subtly disappear out of shot, Paul 100% did that. Paul was center of the picture, realized that maybe all the paps and all the TV cameras there looking at everybody. And, you know, Paul obviously is a shy man and doesn't want to be on TV, and tried to subtly step backwards. And it was the most hilarious. I thank the Lord for being able to rewind live TV and then kind of play it back again because, it was hilarious. I'm sure that's not your favorite or worst moment.
No,
let's throw it back to you.
My phone lit up about 2 minutes later, and I instantly realised that was pretty bad. It was. I watch it back now, and I still can't think. In my head, it looks so. I've got away with that. Nah, not one bit. So best and worst memories. So I mean, it's something. I'd like it sometime to come back on. And talk a little bit about like the Brawn GP season, because again, I could talk probably 30 minutes about this year because it was so unusual. So I'm going to say the Brawn GP season, and again, people research it, have a look at it. It's not fake; it did actually happen. It has no context, this part, until I explain it, but we haven't got the time for that. The worst moment, just give the story a little bit, would be the Brawn GP redundancies. So the day after we went and won the first race of the season against every odds possible, we were still celebrating, partying, and there's more to this story as well. And then the next day, they basically trimmed the workforce by nearly 3/4. So we were in Malaysia then by that time for the next race, and then we got sat down and told who was leaving the team. And we knew that some of those people we're never going to see again, and that's where the industry is. And that was the reality of what was actually happening to the team at that time. I'd love to talk more about the Brawn story, and I'd love to do that another time. But yeah, that would be my best and worst moment. That was so mixed emotions in the space of a couple of weeks. But the actual Brawn GP season, we could touch on that another time, because that is Hollywood. If you released a Hollywood film on F1, you'd walk out the cinema at the end of it laughing, going, "Well, that would never happen." But it did happen, I can assure you.
So I think that makes sense. I think we want to do, as we build up to the new season. I was about to say next year, but it's obviously this year because it's 2020.
It is this year, yeah.
As we build up to the new season, we want to do one episode where we kind of try to look back over some of the best seasons in the past for any kind of new people that are getting into the sport, kind of highlight some of, you might hear some of these past seasons referenced, because that always happens in sport, right? You always reference some of the highlights that have gone before. So I think we wanted to do an episode kind of looking back at maybe the Michael and Damon shunt and those kind of season highlights. So I think a Brawn insight would be a great thing to kind of add in there. So it'd be awesome to get you back on and dive into that a bit more.
It'll be a pleasure to, because it's something I'm deeply proud of. It really is, and it's a story which you would never believe if someone told you it. It's probably the proudest moment of my career that year, for sure. Well, actually, no, 100% is like.
We definitely need to get you back and do that. And I would actually say we somehow made it through an hour and 10 minutes or so of amazing conversation. And we still haven't talked about the way the season ended this year, which, by the way, is a topic of its own, which we need to do as well, because I was mentioning this to Paul as we were getting dialed in here to start. I accidentally is pretty close to the right words, rewatched some highlights of the championship decider, and it made me still feel kind of ill and queasy. And I'd love to get Paul's thoughts on it, at least his personal thoughts, but not tonight. We shall do that at another time. So please stay tuned. But I would just say, before I let Rob close us, Paul, I would just say thanks, man. Meeting you has been tremendous. Getting your thoughts has been tremendous. And I've really appreciated your perspectives. And I've learned a ton. I know all of our listeners have as well. And I just can't thank you enough for the generosity of your time and insights.
It's really no problem, and like I've said, I'd love to come on again. I love what you guys are doing. Being over here in the US for another week or so, I'm really enjoying it. And at the end of the day, F1 needs the USA, because this place is fantastic. The support is fantastic. We go to Austin and the crowd are fantastic. Indianapolis, when we were there, the crowd was fantastic. F1 in America needs to work. So what you guys are doing is absolutely brilliant, and long may it continue, and long may you get a load more followers, because you deserve it, because it's a superb podcast. I'm really pleased for you.
Well, thanks for saying that, Paul. I mean, if only we had somebody that was inside the industry that had a huge network that he could maybe share the details of this podcast to, like to a driver or something. But Brian, can you think of anyone like that? I'm out of ideas.
I can't either. I'll let you figure that out, Rob.
Well,
I'm gonna be the Paul Harris on that Monaco meme, though, aren't I? It's gonna sneak subtly into the corner. No, and I will do. I will share it about. I have shared it on some of my socials already. But no, as I said, keep it up, guys. It's phenomenal what you're doing. It's really good content. And like I've said, for somebody who's worked in the sport as long as I have, I'm enjoying listening to it. So you're doing something right.
Well, thanks for that, Paul. And we are probably at our longest episode, but I think it deserves it, because you've been our first and our best guest that we've ever had on this show.
I'm delighted with that. That's good.
And enjoy the rest of your time here in the US, and we will definitely reach out to try and schedule a follow-on. So yeah, thanks again for your time, and thank you for listening, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon. Welcome back to the Dirty Side of the Track.